Bruce's music has kind of matured kind of at the same pace as I was growing up. I feel like, for the last 40 years, I've kind of been on this journey with him. But the how I got to that kind of start that point was almost accidental when I was in fourth or fifth grade. So that would have been 75, 76, somewhere right around there. A kid transferred to our school from New Jersey, and we became friends, and he was incessantly talking about this guy, Bruce, which was really weird for, a 9 or 10-year-old.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Listing Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson, and joining me today is a new friend, Jon Poklop. And Jon, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I know. You're selling yourself short already. I was sending out a tweet like, "Oh, I'm so excited." You're like, "Hey, you haven't talked to me yet." Hold on. Let's build low expectations.
This is my first podcast, so
okay. Well, welcome. I hope I'll make it easy for you, and I hope you'll want to do more. So, tell us a little about yourself. Give us your elevator pitch.
Well, born and raised in Chicago, or just outside, basically the first suburb outside of Chicago. So pretty typical. Born in '66, so I'm wonderfully 54 years old. Been a Bruce fan for 40 of that. Pretty normal upbringing. First show was October 10th at the Uptown Theater in Chicago. So
Okay.
the original River tour, right before the band made the jump to arenas. So we were one of the last couple shows before that happened.
White Sox or Cubs?
Cubs. We're North Siders.
Okay.
Although we would go to White Sox games at least once a year, so we could see a game under the lights.
I imagine.
Before they put lights in at Wrigley, my grandfather would always take us to one game a year down at the old Comiskey Park.
My family was not sports fans growing up at all. I mean, none whatsoever. I was born in Louisiana. We spent some time in Kentucky, and my dad was in the Army, moved around a lot. And so he didn't have that sports, family. And so when I moved to Dallas in '86, you kind of, okay, well, I guess I'll be a Cowboy fan. I guess I'll be a Texas Rangers fan. I guess I'll be a Dallas Mavericks, and then later a Dallas Stars. And my son and I are both fascinated. Like when we were up at New York at one of the MetLife, toward the end of the tour, the second leg of the River tour, he's like, okay, like, how do you decide between a Jets and a Giants? I mean, like, and like, how do you figure out which one are you going to be, Mets or Yankees? And you're like, oh, it's all about your family. It's all about your family. So
it's how you were raised, whichever way.
Exactly. Well, so I always like to start at the beginning. Well, first off, Jon, how are you doing with the pandemic?
Well, I'm doing better. I actually was diagnosed COVID positive on the 2nd of January.
Oh, no.
And spent a wonderful 10 days in the hospital.
Oh, my goodness.
But it's all good now. I took an extra week off of work just to kind of recuperate and,
So it hit you pretty hard.
Yeah. And I don't know where I caught it, who was infected that gave it to me. I had the full pneumonia and everything, although I had never really felt that sick. It was really kind of weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, they kept me for a while. So
well, I am so glad you're doing okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm pretty much over it. So it's all good now.
And are you working from home?
Well, I have been for a year,
Yeah.
basically. But no, I still go to clients.
Mhm.
So don't go to the office much, but I still have to visit clients. So
Okay.
I'm still, or always was out and about,
Okay.
all last year.
And
But
what's your gig?
we're the I work for Rico.
Okay.
I'm a color management guy and do technical sales and support of
Okay.
the big printers.
Okay. Very nice.
So
Cool.
a lot of windshield time.
Hmm.
So I drive 30,000 miles a year or a little
Yeah.
more, and get to listen to East Street Radio a lot.
I was going to ask, do you do music? Do you do talk radio? Do you do podcasts?
It's a mix.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I do some podcasts, some talk radio, and a lot of just the Sirius XM
Yeah.
various channels,
That's
but
nice.
mostly East Street Radio, but
Yes,
not
absolutely.
exclusively.
Yeah, every once in a while I like to flip around too. I like road trip radio
Yeah,
when we're actually on a road trip, and I love the covers channel for some reason. Depends on, sometimes you'll hear some interesting covers.
yeah,
So, and on the weekends, the '70s channel, because you can catch Casey Kasem, and that brings me back to my childhood. So
yeah. And my radio buffers, like 25 minutes of each channel.
yeah.
So it's great if I'm like halfway through something on, a Bruce song that I'm not particularly into, I can skip ahead to a different channel and
Oh,
then come
nice.
back and I won't, it'll just pick up at the beginning of the next song.
Oh,
So
that's
I
nice.
won't miss anything,
Oh, that's
uh,
good.
which is pretty slick.
That is very slick
Or,
technology. There you go.
or if I get a phone call, it pauses and just again
Mhm.
picks up, where it left off, which
A-
is, it's
Absolutely.
nice. I didn't know that the car did that when I bought it.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize it was doing that until at some point I was like, wow, it's always at the beginning of a song when I change the channel. What is going on? And then I, figured that out. And I was like, that's a really cool feature.
That is a cool feature. Yeah, I like that. Well, I always like to go back to the beginning. So,
Hmm.
John, you said you born and raised in Chicago. What kind of music was your family musical? Did they listen to a lot of music? And if so, what kind?
Uh, my mother was mostly into Neil Diamond.
Okay.
So that meant I had to listen to a lot of Neil Diamond
Sure.
growing up. Uh, I actually took my mother to see him a couple times and was wonderful.
Oh, I
He
bet it
put
was.
on
I've never
great
seen him,
shows.
but yeah, that's great.
Uh, and then we went to see John Denver. She was big into John Denver. So he was actually the first person to play at an outdoor, arena that got built not too terribly far from our house. So we went to that. And then my brother was big into Harry Chapin. So he got me into that, uh, really early on. And then, that neatly ties into Bruce, although I didn't know it at the time. So probably those are my two big ones, is Harry Chapin and Bruce.
So we could spend a whole episode talking about Harry because
Yeah.
I'm a huge Harry Chapin fan. In fact, a couple of years ago, I had a fellow Harry Chapin fan join me, and we did a whole hour of talking about Harry's music and the different stories, and each gave our 5 songs that we suggested non-Chapin fans to listen to. So, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Did you ever get to see him live?
Unfortunately not. He used to play every year at it's actually it was at a mall not too far from my
Yeah,
house, but they had uh, I don't know, it's probably a 300 seat theater.
yeah.
It was in the round with the rotating stage. It was really a pretty cool place.
Hmm.
But the early show always sold out immediately, and I was too young to go to the late show, I was told,
Yeah.
because it started at like 11, and
Yes.
so I couldn't get my mother or my grandparents to take me. So unfortunately, I never did. Although I do remember where I was when I heard the news of the car accident
Oh, really?
and
Share.
that he passed. Yeah. So the town I grew up in Park Ridge, um, has an old movie theater that seats like 1,100 single screen. The old, very ornate, building, the old school movie theater. And we were in the car right outside of it when the news broke. And I'm, remember being very upset.
Yeah. So I saw him a couple of years before he died. It must have been 78, 79. He was there in Lake Charles, Louisiana. There was bad weather, and so the band could not make it. So it was him and his guitar
Mhm.
did the whole show. Um, and it was truly, it felt like he was in your living room telling
Right.
stories. It was
Yeah.
great. You know, what's funny is someone on Twitter today said, tell how old you are without giving your age by naming a band you saw. And I replied, John Denver. And someone said, oh, I'm jealous. Yeah, once again, like probably 70, 78, 79, maybe in Lake Charles. We saw John, and he was in the round. You know, they had a round stage that he would slowly rotate. So, and the band was all around him.
Mhm.
So yeah, so great stuff. So you when did you, like, you've heard Neil Diamond, you found Harry Chapin. When did you discover Bruce?
How'd
And
I
what
get to
about,
Bruce?
yeah, and what about him spoke to you, John?
Uh, well, speaking to me, were the stories at first.
Okay.
Uh, that was really kind of what kind of drew me to it. Obviously, the live show.
Yeah.
That's a no-brainer. And then also kind of that, you know, Bruce's music has kind of matured kind of at the same pace as I was growing up.
Right.
So I feel like, for the last 40 years, I've kind of been on this journey with him.
Yes.
But the how I got to that kind of start that point
Yeah.
was almost accidental. Um, when I was in fourth or fifth grade, so that would have been 75, 76, somewhere right around there. Um, a kid transferred to our school from New Jersey,
Okay.
and we became friends. And he was incessantly talking about this guy Bruce, which was really weird for a 9 or 10-year-old.
Yes.
And honestly, I didn't care,
Yeah.
because I wasn't hearing that on the radio or anything like that. And then in '79, another friend who at least would play Born to Run when I'd go to his house, but only that one song. And so, of course, I thought that was side one because,
Mhm.
why wouldn't the title track be on side one? Didn't realize it was side two. But uh, the three of us went to see the No Nukes movie in the theater. So that's kind of my claim to fame because not many people can say that because it didn't play many places, but it came to Park Ridge.
Mhm.
And we got there not too long before Bruce's set. And then we sat through the whole movie again until he played again. And then most of the theater got up and walked out. So that was the first time I actually saw him and could put kind of like a face to the music. But I still wasn't, it wasn't like, oh, I got to rush out and, see this guy or anything. And I don't think I had even bought an album yet at that point.
Okay.
But then my friend won tickets to the Uptown Theater show off of the radio. And our New Jersey friend couldn't go, or his parents said he was too young to go, or something. I don't remember the exact reason. So he invited me, and I was like, sure, I'll go. And so we went. And of course, at that point, Born to Run was the first song. And I remember thinking, great, I now know no other song that will be played tonight. But that was my baptism in a 4,000 seat theater. Uh, and it's been a wild ride ever since.
So, you know, I I say there's two kinds of people: the people that go to their first show and say, boy, that was long. And the other people that go, oh my goodness, I want to go to this over and over again. So obviously that, as you said, your baptism, I think that's a perfect way to say it. I mean, it's your road to Damascus moment where the light shines and you know, stop being Saul and become Paul. The was it just the energy? Was it the story? Can you summarize why? Because you've heard him, you saw it on film, but that live energy, what about it just made you flip the
Well,
switch?
I mean, it was like nothing I had experienced. Um, as I said, it's a long way from John Denver,
Yes.
performing wise.
Hmm.
And I hate to admit it, but my grandparents had taken me to see Captain and Tennille
Okay.
at that theater in the Round, and
Yeah.
the Osmonds.
Okay.
So those three shows were really the concerts before Bruce. Um,
So I
so it was not the same.
no, it wasn't. I can imagine. Like, yeah, and I would have loved to seen the Osmonds in their heyday.
It wasn't bad.
Yeah,
I
I'm
mean,
sure.
that was when they were on TV, and so
Yeah,
everyone knew who they were, and the whole
yeah,
family was there, and
sure.
it wasn't terrible, but I am
No,
embarrassed by it.
no, no, you shouldn't be. Captain and Tennille, absolutely. That's amazing.
Yeah,
And
they were
then,
they were good.
yeah, and so, but yes, it is night and day, right?
Right.
It is. Yeah, I can imagine.
From the
Um,
first, drum roll at the
mhm,
beginning of Born to Run, just through the whole
yeah.
show. It was just a assault on the senses, and you know,
Now, when I went, it was the Rising tour was my first live show, and I had been a casual fan at best. Had bought the River, Born in the USA, Tunnel of Love. Um, had bought the live disc, but had not studied a lot of them, and actually had bought the Rising on CD, but had listened to it maybe once. Um, so when I went without knowing the songs, the story I tell, John, is I felt like I'd gone into this really good movie halfway through it, and I knew I'd love the movie if I could see the first part. So how about you? You mentioned, okay, I'm not going to know any other songs. What was that like? Can you remember?
uh, not really.
Okay,
Honestly, it's a lot of a blur.
sure.
I've looked at the set list years later and go, oh yeah, I kind of remember that. I mean, I remember the Detroit medley at the end,
Yeah.
uh, but between Born to Run and the Detroit medley, I other than it was like pretty much all the other River shows of that era.
Hmm.
Chicago usually has early tour dates, so I feel like the shows are kind of more like what Bruce intends for a particular album.
Yeah.
And then by the end of the tour, they're tired of doing that, so they're doing more kind of crazy stuff and pulling
Hmm.
other stuff out of the hat. And it's a very different experience late in the tour.
Yeah.
So I was always jealous of the late New York and Jersey shows, because I was like,
Mhm.
that's such a much better set list. Not that
Yeah.
there was anything wrong with the set list of what I saw,
Yeah.
um, but it was just different. Uh,
So I always like to preface this question, John, with, the amount of times you've seen him is not a fair barometer of how big of a fan you are.
right.
You living in Chicago, he does their most tours, but like, as someone who lives in Louisiana, like I did growing up, or Texas, or someone depending on their age, economic situation. So, but for the record, have you counted how many times you've seen him?
I gave up at 80,
Okay, so all right,
and
yes,
basically my rule of thumb is anywhere within a 6-hour radius of my house
okay,
is where I was
okay,
willing to go.
all right,
Um, but then add in now two to New York. But you
yeah.
know, Cleveland, Detroit, uh, St. Louis, Minneapolis,
Hmm.
Milwaukee. I'm very happy that they've added Milwaukee the last few tours. Since about 2009, they've been coming consistently to Milwaukee,
Hmm.
and Nils came to Milwaukee on the Blue with Lou tour, which was great because I got to see him in a very small space.
Oh, nice.
Um, so seen him a
Yeah.
couple times, seen Little Steven a couple times.
Hmm.
Uh, so
Now, um, have you created a My Boss Time account?
no,
Okay, so all right, here's your homework. Go to myBossTime.com. You can create a free account, and then he has every show ever on the database. It's broken down by years. And so you go, oh, I went to that one. Oh, I went to that one. Oh, I went to this one. And then behind the scenes, he does all the algorithms and will tell you, here are your most heard songs. Here are your rarest songs. Here are the rarities that, like, he's only done The Wall like 8 times. I was lucky enough to see him perform it live once. So it will take you down a rabbit hole, but it's a fun rabbit hole. So you should check that out. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, good. So tell me, and I know you sent me an email, Jon, sharing some of these, but tell a few stories about shows you've gone to and give me some of those experiences.
Yeah. I was kind of thinking about that. Obviously, I've seen him so many times, and every show is great. And there's something kind of unique about every show as well. But I tried to, kind of get it down to a manageable few.
Yeah.
But like on the Tunnel of Love tour, I saw back-to-back shows in Chicago. And the second one was on St. Patrick's Day. And Bruce did a little Irish jig during Rosalita.
Oh, how
And the
fun.
place just went nuts because
Yes.
it was completely unexpected. He didn't do it the night before. So that was just one of those fun little things that all of a sudden kind of starts dancing.
Yes.
But if I had to pick one show, again, impossible really to do, but it would probably be the Apollo show. And again, I won the tickets by calling in, and the person I talked to was like, "Are you really going to come from Chicago?" And I'm like, "Yes."
Well, tell me a little bit more about that story, right? To
Yeah.
remind people, this is a contest that East Street Radio is sponsoring, correct?
Right. Yes. So it was a private show for I think it's the 10th anniversary of Sirius XM, if I'm not mistaken,
yes.
but it's some anniversary of Sirius XM. And so it was primarily for people who work there and celebrities, and then some contest winners of actual Bruce fans.
Right.
So that at least someone in the audience would know what was going on. And, kind of the thing that, I don't know if it was, well, it surprised me, but the first 5 rows, I think it was, were the contest winners.
Oh, cool.
So all the celebrities were sitting behind us.
Oh, nice.
Which was wonderful. Just kind of that we were more important than them.
Yeah.
So that was really cool. And then I took my daughter, who was 7 at the time, to the show. So that was her first concert. And so we got to meet Bette Midler. She was sitting about 6 or 7 rows behind us. We were in the 4th row. And then Ben Stiller was a couple rows behind us with Christine Taylor and Michael Douglas and Catherine Zeta-Jones, and just other more localized New York people. But that was just kind of really cool to be like, haha, your seats are worse than ours.
Did your daughter know Bette Midler? Is that why?
No,
okay.
She didn't know, but I recognized her, and I was, just took her back there, and because she was sitting on the aisle, so it was kind of easy to do that. So that was it was wonderful that everyone that won the contest was sitting, right down front. We all couldn't believe it. We figured we'd be in the balcony or something, which would have been fine too. I mean, the Apollo is a small place, but that was incredible. And the thing I kind of most remember at the beginning was the crowd, at least the contest winners part of the crowd, first show without Clarence, and we're all sitting there like, how is this going to work? And I think everyone was thankful that Bruce picked Jake to replace him, because he should, that's the right person, but no one really heard him play. So,
and
we didn't know.
There was a horn section at this point, right? Like, it was almost like, okay, we can't replace him with one. We're going to have, 2 or 3 horn players. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was the full 5-piece horn section, just like on the Tunnel of Love. And Jake was back with them. He wasn't down front like Clarence would have been.
Yeah.
So we were all kind of like, okay, well, yeah, you need a whole horn section to replace Clarence. This makes sense. No
Yes.
problem. But when they played Badlands, which I want to say was the fifth song, and Jake played the solo just as himself, not the whole, horn section, and you could just feel kind of a wave of relief come over the crowd
Oh,
at
how
that point,
interesting.
going, okay, we're fine.
Mhm.
This is going to work, and obviously it took him a while to settle kind of in,
Yeah.
to the role, but you could, there was definitely a feeling in the crowd when he hit those notes that we're okay. And you probably wouldn't get that on the radio broadcast, I
Yeah.
assume, but definitely, standing in that crowd, that was, it was real.
So I had called Sirius and asked them to add streaming to my service
Mm-hmm.
because both my wife and I had XM in our cars, and so I asked like, how much is it? And like it's $3 or $4 a month. Yes, get it, get it. So so it's Friday night, and it's my wife and I. Um, she is she tolerates Bruce. I mean, she is a casual fan at best. And so
Yeah.
the idea of like on Friday night, hey, love you, honey, I'm going to go sit in the computer room and listen to this show. But when she went to sleep, normally like 9 or 10. And so I get on the computer and, they're replaying it. And so I think I catch the end of it and then they start the new, right? And when they go to City of Ruins,
Mm-hmm.
and when he says, "Are we missing anybody?"
Yeah.
I just started crying.
Yep.
And I
Yeah.
can only, please talk to me about what it was like being there.
Uh, well, obviously, it was very emotional for everybody, uh, because that was the first time,
Yes.
and the same with in 10th Avenue when they would stop
Yes.
completely, before, um, they didn't show the video the montage that they'd done with Clarence. I don't think they showed that at the Apollo because they didn't have a screen.
Okay.
Um, I got to see that in Chicago, which was, of course, also very emotional to see, to have it stop and play,
Yes.
a minute of video of Clarence. Um,
Then they later added Danny, and so yes.
mhm. Yep. So that was, yeah, it was wonderful.
Yeah. And the idea of if you're here and we're here, they're here.
Right.
And then if you're here and we're here, they're here. You just over, and Bruce is one of the things I think he does so well is that repeating those phrases, just the right way to do it. So yeah, I can imagine. I saw him later at a Wrecking Ball tour up in Cleveland, and so and where he did that, the same thing. So yeah, I can only imagine. But this is not the only ticket you've won calling E Street Radio, is it?
Correct. I do want to add one more thing
Oh,
about the Apollo,
please.
though. So, uh, they let us in fairly early, and they were serving hors d'oeuvres, and it was, very fancy. But we're sitting down at our seat, and the lady sitting next to us asks my daughter, who again, 7 years old, doesn't really know a whole lot of Bruce music other than what
Yeah.
I play in the car, but if she would be willing to go on stage to sing "Waiting on a Sunny Day,"
Okay.
and would she like this lady who we've never met before to pretend to be her mother, so she could go up too.
Wow. Okay.
And my daughter's like, no. They tried to interview her on E Street
Stranger
Radio
danger. Stranger
before,
danger. Yeah.
before the concert, and she's like, no, I don't want to talk to you. She later regretted that, but
Yeah.
so I'm like, well, from the middle of the fourth row, you're not going to get on stage anyway. But so they start playing "Waiting on a Sunny Day," and Bruce decides to walk through the audience
Okay.
because he's not going to have someone on stage to sing. So he is doing his, walk over the armrests thing and, not crawling, walking through the middle of the crowd. And he ends up in front of Ben Stiller. And there's a video on YouTube of this. And so he's like staring down at them and singing to them, and everyone's turned and, watching them, obviously. And then he comes around and he's kind of heading back toward the stage, but he spots my daughter. So he goes up the third row. So he's right in front of us, and he's looking down at her and he's singing to her instead of the other way around.
Nice.
And when he gets to the must have been a tear in my eye, he takes his finger and he's like looking down at her and he shows her where the tear is going to go. And then he eventually goes back on the stage, and then she fell asleep shortly thereafter. So I say that was Bruce singing her a lullaby and put her to sleep.
But
because it was late for her.
But to be candid, right? Like, okay, I've had Bruce serenade me. What else is there? It's going to be all downhill.
She's like, I'm done now.
Yeah, I'm going to go to sleep.
So that was amazing.
Yeah.
The only thing that, it was a short show.
Yes.
That was the only, downside, but, it certainly.
I do remember thinking that it was, and in fact, you can, when you buy the official download, it is much shorter than a normal show. Right. But it was for a radio broadcast. I mean,
right. It wasn't a normal show, so
yeah,
and we weren't about to complain.
No,
about it at all.
Yeah.
And the band was tight, even though it was their first show. And I've always loved horns when they're on the tour, so that it was all good.
Yeah, but one of the questions I asked early in the podcast, John, and so I'll ask you because you've done both, is do you prefer the E Street Band on steroids with the horn section, the backup singers, or just the E Street Band, which is 10 members, right? It isn't like, which one do you prefer?
I prefer the horns.
Okay.
So I thought the Tunnel of Love Express was wonderful, with the full horn section. And I've listened to the stuff from 77 with the horns, and it adds so much. I'm sure the logistics are worse having 5 extra people on the road, but I wish they were always there. The backup singers, I can kind of go either way on. On Wrecking Ball, that tour, they were wonderful, and the songs where they really were, a major part of it.
Yeah.
Kind of the soul and gospel kind of songs and stuff. They added so much. I've got no problem having the E Street Orchestra with 17 people on stage.
Yeah,
that's perfectly all right.
Yeah, because you think Shackled and Drawn, with that full band is just amazing.
But I've seen him solo 3 times too. Where it's just him, and that's pretty good also.
I bet it is. Yes.
So I can go either way. I didn't even mind the 92 band, the Human Touch Lucky Town band. They could play. Obviously, they weren't the E Street Band, so I understand why they got a lot of grief.
Yes.
When playing kind of the old stuff, which wasn't quite right. But certainly on the newer stuff, they sounded great. And when I kind of think back of which is my best story, that they're one of the top ones too. Because when I only saw that tour once, but we had lawn seats at a place and it was threatening rain. I was like, not in a good mood. It's like, well, I got to go, but it's, I don't know. But there was a ticket drop while we happened to be standing near the box office while we were waiting to get in and listening to the sound check. And so I told my date, hold on. And I ran over to the box office as when I heard someone else kind of screaming over there. And we ended up on folding chairs in front of the front row.
Oh, nice.
So I had to buy 2 extra tickets, which I was more than happy to do. And the ticket person was getting the seating chart out. And I'm like, I don't care where they are. I just don't want to be on the lawn.
Yeah.
I want to be under the pavilion out of the rain. And she's like, oh no, they're right down here. And she points to an area on that tour, or at least at that arena, the stage came out in like a half moon
Hmm.
a little bit. So they set up like 20 folding chairs in front of the front row.
Okay.
So I spent that show leaning on the stage.
Nice. Very
and
nice.
and so I was like, well, I can't get better tickets than this, so this will be my number one show. you know.
Yeah, I guess so. That's pretty crazy.
And then that was right before Bruce's birthday. So I
Hmm.
want to say it was the 21st of September.
Okay.
And the show ended and we were getting ready to leave. And for some reason, I glanced up into the rigging because we were like under the lighting guys. And the guy was looking down at me and he just kind of shook his hands like, don't go anywhere. I'm like, okay. So we stayed in our seats and Bruce came back out, I don't know, 7, 8 minutes later, and they played Working on the Highway.
Oh, very cool.
And the rumor, according to Backstreet's magazine, I don't know if it's true, but someone gave him a birthday cake when they
Okay.
got off stage, and that put him in a really good mood. So they came out and played one more song.
Oh, very
So
cool.
I don't know if it's true or not, but it's a good story, and
Yeah.
you know,
When
so
when I was in Louisville for the the Second River tour, he had done Shout and it was over and everything was done, and everyone had left the stage, um, and I saw Max go to the front of the stage and hand someone his drumsticks, and and we're just yay, 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 and all of a sudden you see Bruce walk back on stage and pick up the guitar, and I swear the rest of the band like, what?
wait, you didn't tell us what?
Yeah, and they did Bobby Jean, you
Okay.
know, and like it felt like there was a Christmas gift underneath the tree, that it was like the end of Christmas Day, and like, oh wait, really, we have one more present that we didn't unwrap.
Yep.
Like, it was just so great. um so okay, you did
Okay.
win tickets a
So
second
back
time
to
though.
yeah.
Yeah.
So back to the second time on Sirius, I won tickets to the Broadway show.
Okay.
And at least that time they didn't ask if I would actually come from
Yeah.
Chicago, so that was good. So we flew out, just did a quick couple of nights.
Who did you bring?
Went to a couple. Well, I brought my daughter again, but she didn't go to the show this time. It was my wife's turn.
Okay.
So my wife's like, I'm not staying in the hotel a second time.
Okay.
So she went to the Broadway show, and we made my daughter stay in the hotel.
Is she a fan?
Casually,
Okay.
she has to be because I play it so much.
Yeah.
But again, not a huge fan. I've
Right.
schlepped her along to a few shows,
Okay.
um, but yeah, we went to a couple Broadway plays,
Hmm.
and then we had that show at night. At that time, I did get interviewed on Sirius by Dave Marsh and Jim Rotolo on the way
Hmm.
in. So that time I did sit down with them. So
Oh,
that
nice.
was kind of fun. Uh, the thing I remember most about that, other than the intimacy of it,
Yeah.
and I thought the lighting and stage setup was amazing. It was very simple, but it was perfect for what the show was. But there were a lot of serious people like at the bar making a lot of noise during most of the show, unfortunately.
Oh, really? That's sad.
Yeah, it was kind of surprising. They seemed to be mostly in the balcony. The main floor seemed to be contest winners for the most part, and they were very respectful. But the bar at the Walter Kerr is at the back of the main floor,
Yes, it is.
so the serious people would come down and be rather loud.
Mm.
It didn't really distract from the show itself that much, but it was kind of annoying. I wanted to turn around and go, "Shut up,"
Yes,
but
absolutely.
the people behind me probably wouldn't have liked that. So
No.
so I didn't do it.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, it was an amazing show, and I was kind of like, okay, well, if I'm done now, if this is the last Bruce show I ever see, this was a good one to go out on.
Yeah.
You know, uh,
What do
fortunately,
you?
it wasn't. But
Yeah, it wasn't. No. Uh, what are your thoughts on Letter to You?
um, I like it. I haven't listened to it a ton. Usually, kind of how you were talking about when you first saw him on the Rising and you weren't
Yeah.
necessarily that familiar. Until I see the songs performed, my kind of like my first listen through a new album or CD, it doesn't really click necessarily. Um, I mean, obviously, I love Ghosts and Letter to You, and
Hmm.
it's wonderful. I don't have Apple TV, so I haven't watched the movie. I still
Hmm.
have to get around to doing a trial subscription so I can watch that. Um, but really, until I kind of see it performed, it
Yeah.
doesn't, it doesn't necessarily hit home. Uh,
So, um,
so Western Stars was great because we could go see that in the movie theater at least.
yeah, I saw it
Um,
twice in the theater. Before I get off, so Ted Lasso
mhm.
is a uh, series that's also on Apple TV, and it's 10 half hours, and it is absolutely brilliant. If you're even a casual sports fan, it's just the idea that an American college football is going to coach a European soccer team in England, and it is so funny and so sweet and so good. So you can get two things out of it then.
Yeah.
And then For All Mankind is another series that's on Apple TV, that what if Russia landed on the moon first. So there you could get more than just one series out of
Yeah.
your 7-day trial. You're like, okay, honey, here's
We got to
this.
sit down and watch this.
Yes, exactly. So that's good. Um,
Yeah.
do you talk about Western Stars? Were you surprised that the different kind of genre he was singing in?
No, because every album's different.
Hmm.
You know, I often, think about putting a CD together of the first songs of every album
Yeah,
because if you know, do that, you're seeing, man, this changes a lot more than we give them credit for, I think,
yeah,
because they're all so different. Uh, and so it was like, okay, well, as I said, I feel like I've kind of matured with him,
yes,
on this 40-year journey. And I was just kind of like, well, he's done country songs, or at least on the periphery kind of country before, and he certainly listens to a lot of it as he's talked about. So kind of why not? You know, um, I think the film version with the strings brings a lot more out of the songs than the album version.
yeah,
And I was kind of mad I bought pre-ordered the album version with not knowing that the other version's coming out.
yeah,
Uh, so, um, I just thought it was wonderful. Whether we ever see those songs in concert is up to debate. Because by the time they tour again, that album's going to be pretty old.
yeah.
There'll be a few songs I'm sure they play, but not all of them. So it was great to see them performed at least, in the
Mhm.
barn.
Yeah,
Um, it'll be interesting to see what the E Street Band does with those songs.
yeah,
They'll do wonderful with them, obviously, but
yeah.
it'll be different.
It
So
was. I love seeing little Steven do Tucson Train.
yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
thought
that
that
was
was a lot
fun.
of fun. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I saw Soulfire twice. I saw
yeah,
two consecutive shows, Milwaukee and Chicago,
yeah,
and then unfortunately he had to cancel the Summer of Sorcery show that I was going to when he got sick.
yeah. Me too. He
So I was like, oh
Dallas. Yeah,
man,
he did. Yes,
so
absolutely.
that was too bad. But yeah,
Mhm.
he was wonderful. Like I said, I've seen Nils a couple times and
Yeah.
Max. So
Mhm.
yeah, so I always tell people, you may not be able to see the E Street Band, but you can see these other guys when the E Street Band's
Yeah,
not touring, and
exactly.
they all put on, wonderful shows.
Do you have favorite songs or albums that you'd want to share, John?
Uh, Wild and the Innocents, my favorite.
Okay.
So I just say, if the Stuck on a Desert Island kind of thing, and you can only have one album, that's it.
Okay.
for me. And a lot of that's because there's lots of kind of different styles within the album.
Hmm.
So you can kind of go, oh, well, today I feel like, you know, celebrating. Okay, you can put Rosalita on, or, you know, today I feel kind of like chilling back. So you can put on Sandy, or, you know, so that that's my number one album. Born to Run would probably be second, and a fairly close second. Um, but just side two of The Wild and the Innocent is just an amazing album side for people who still remember albums. Um, so those would be the top two. Of the newer stuff, Wrecking Ball is probably my favorite. The Rising was wonderful, of
Yeah.
course. Um, you know, the Seeger sessions was a lot of fun,
Hmm.
and that show was a lot of fun. Um, so it's, you know, there's always something for your mood.
Yeah.
So, you know, tomorrow it could be Tunnel of Love, and you know, the next day it could be Darkness. You know, you never
Yeah.
know.
Exactly. Yeah. Um. So 2022, we get another tour. Is there songs that you haven't heard live that you want to hear?
Yeah, I was thinking of this because you had sent this, you know, that question, and really, other than the new albums that
Yes, that
that
goes
haven't been
without saying,
toured,
right? Like
you
Western
know,
Stars and Letter to You.
obviously,
Yes.
you know, we're
Yeah.
going to hear some of that, but you know, not really.
Okay.
Um, you know, I've pretty much heard what I want. You know, like you can say, oh, well, that's like your favorite song this week
Sure.
or, you
Yeah.
know, this year. Um, I've probably seen it live.
Yeah.
So the one that was always on my bucket list since the first River tour is when I first saw him was Prove It All Night with the 78 intro.
Right.
Like everybody, I had, you know, the 78 tour bootlegs of the radio shows on vinyl, you know, before the CDs came out. And, you know, that was always the song.
Hmm.
So when the when they started playing it again, at least occasionally, on Wrecking Ball, I was like, well, maybe there's hope. You know,
Hmm. Yeah.
maybe I'll get lucky, you know, and see that. So um, I tweet with Steve Van Zandt quite a bit,
Hmm.
and so I before the show at Wrigley Field, uh, I tweeted, you know, this is on my bucket list. Tell, you know, ask Bruce if somehow he could play this at the first show because that was the one
Hmm.
I was going to. And then he never replied. And then at least to that, when we
Hmm.
talk movies and politics enough. But
Yeah.
but anyway, and then we're sitting there and the lights go down and Roy's piano starts playing the intro to it. And I was like, oh my God, it's happening. And, you know, could have been completely a coincidence. That could have been Bruce's plan for the whole, you know,
Right.
leading up to that. But I take credit for that.
There you go. Good for
So
you. I
I don't know if it's
appreciate.
true or, you know, again, I don't know
Yeah,
if it's true or
that's
not,
right.
but, you know, but
Don't let.
I'll take credit for that one.
Okay, that sounds
Um,
good. Yeah, don't let the truth get in the way of a good story, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
But beyond that, uh, really, the other song I would want to hear, there's probably about a 0.001% chance of it ever being played because
Hmm.
I don't think it ever has been played. And it's questionable whether it was even ever recorded. And that was, or that is, Summer on Signal Hill.
Okay.
So I've always loved that song from the first time I heard it on Killer Joe's rendition,
Hmm.
not Clarence's. So,
Yeah.
you know, I don't expect it to ever get played, but
Yeah.
you know, if you hold up enough signs, maybe he'll be like,
There he goes. Yeah.
why do you even know that song kind of
Yes.
thing? And it would get played. And then the other one, which I know there's no chance of it ever being played, is the 74 version of Jungle Land,
Okay.
the original one with the jazz break.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
yeah, I've loved it since the first time I heard it on a bootleg. And, you know, maybe on Tracks Volume 2,
Yes, maybe.
you
Yeah, we
know,
get that. Yeah.
maybe it'll come out on that. I doubt that too, but
Hmm.
um, I've always loved the early performances where the guitar solo and the sax solo are inverted,
Hmm.
but the version from '74 with different lyrics, and then the big, um, David Sanchez led jazz break that sounds an awful lot like Kitty's Back. Um, at the end, just it's such a different vibe from
Yeah.
the final version,
Sure.
which again is probably my second favorite song of all time. Um,
Okay.
So it's but just having an alternate version of it, it would be wonderful here to hear the actual studio rendition instead of the bootleg, which is a little dodgy quality wise.
Very nice. Cool.
So yeah, I mean, I don't anticipate ever hearing them, but those would be the two that are left on my bucket list.
Good. I like that.
So it's you know
So
they're
John,
two weird ones.
no, that's nothing wrong with that. So John, what have I not asked you that I should have asked you?
Um, you could have asked me my opinion on shows where they play an entire album,
Okay.
because I've now seen three.
What three did you see?
Well, unfortunately, the first two were both Born to Run, so they were the same, two different locations, obviously. And so I was at the first show in Chicago, which was the first time they did that, where they played a whole album. And it was someone had asked Bruce to do it, and he's like, "Oh, that would be a neat challenge." And they announced in advance that the Chicago show, I want to say it was August 20th of '09 on the Working on a Dream tour. Uh, they were going to do that, and I already had tickets to that show. And I was like, "Oh, okay, well, yeah, this could be all right. At least I'll hear Meeting Across the River," which I don't think I'd ever heard in concert or seen in concert previous to that. And the thing that I most remember um, from the album was when it was time for Meeting Across the River, a guy walked out on stage with an upright bass, and I'm like, "Who is this?" I didn't have any clue, and it was Richard Davis who played upright bass on that song on the album. And I've since gone back and looked at the liner notes, and it's like, yeah, there he is. I never read him close enough to know it wasn't Gary on the album. So I think I lost your audio. Um, so um, and the upright bass obviously sounds very different from a regular electric bass. And as soon as he started playing, I was like, that's what the album sounds like. That's it, right there. So that was kind of neat. And then I saw him do Born to Run again in Milwaukee, uh, which was fine. It wasn't, like I said, I think I'd prefer just to have him play 8 other songs or half the album and 4 other songs, but it was okay. Um, but then when the River tour came around, I really, I kind of debated whether I wanted to spend, $300 on tickets, or not, because I was like, well, 20 of 20 songs are going to be from that, and then only 10 others maybe if we're lucky. So I was kind of like, yeah, not so sure. um, I'd heard the boot from '09 in New York when they did it, and so I was kind of indecisive. So I said, you know what, I'm going to um, just buy cheap seats up in the bowl, at the back of the arena, and because I just want to hear it, not necessarily, I don't have to be, down front. Um, so we were about halfway up the the balcony at the in Milwaukee, and we got there really early. And my wife wanted to sit in the car, and I was like, "No, we have to go in." She's like, "Why?" And I'm like, "Well, because if you get really lucky, the guy will come around and offer you better seats if you have really bad seats." And she's like, "No, they don't." I'm like, "Yeah, he's the man in black. That's what he does." And so she begrudgingly went in with me. And so again, my wife and my daughter, so this would have been her third show now. Um, We're sitting up far, far away, and the only other people in the whole place basically were the ones in the pit, because they all came running in to, get down by the stage, and there are a few other scattered people. And we're just sitting there, and this guy walks up to us, and he's like, how many are you in your group? And I'm like, 3. And he's like, oh, I got 3 extra tickets if you want them. They're downstairs a little better. I'm like, okay, yeah, absolutely. And I'm thinking to myself, where are these seats? And they were in the 7th row on the side of the stage. So it was just, it was one of those things. And again, I've been really lucky. I got the ticket dump. I won the 2, serious sets of tickets, and we got upgraded to the side of the stage, right about even with the front on Nils's side. And the show was amazing. you know.
I have my own story about that. I was the
Mhm.
second time I went and saw Bruce. It was at Grand Prairie, the Verizon
Mhm.
Theater,
Yep.
and I was at the there's two. There's the bottom section and the top section, right? So
Mhm.
I'm at the very last row of the bottom section. The aisle is here. My seat is here. A a pillar is here. So I have a seat by myself. And a guy comes up and says, "Hey, do you want a better seat?" And I'm thinking, because I had never heard about this, I'm like, no, like, I'm thinking he's the scalper. And all
Right.
of a sudden it hits me, wait a minute, I'm inside the building.
Yeah.
So I go
He's
to
not
him
going to
like,
scalp you from in here.
yeah, exactly. So I go, I'm sorry, do you have a better seat? Oh yeah, sure. So I ended up getting 4th or 5th row. The story I tell, and if you're not a sports fan in Dallas, you don't care, but my seats were better than Babe Loffenberg, who was a backup uh, Cowboy quarterback and the sports
Mhm.
announcer for the Fox station, but not as good as Moose Johnston from the Dallas Cowboys. So I was between them. So that's great. That's wonderful. That's a great story.
Well, and it was fun because, we got to see kind of a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, because we were kind of
Yes.
looking down on the side, below the stage
Yeah.
level. So we kind of got to see some of the techs doing, instrument stuff and whatnot.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
And there was this guy who had this really long beard. That's how I kind of remember him. And he was the accordion tech, because we
Ah.
because we looked down there, and it's like, and there's this guy. He's got these different accordions, because there's probably 4 or 5 of them that the guys switch off from,
Hmm.
and he's doing whatever you do to get an accordion ready for a concert. I have no idea exactly what he was doing, but he was doing it.
He was doing it and doing it
And
with passion.
yes, so I took a picture of him, and I tweeted it out, and I said, you you may think your job is cool, but you're not accordion tech for the E Street Band cool.
That's a
And
good tweet.
he replied before the show started.
Oh, that's cool. That's
And
a very cool.
apparently he is known for his accordion. He's like a famous accordion guy.
Very cool.
But
That's
when
nice.
they tour, he goes out and he takes care of their accordions.
That's awesome.
So that was funny that he was
Yes.
checking the Milwaukee Springsteen hashtag or whatever it
Yeah.
was. But
That's cool. That's very cool.
yeah, it was a wonderful. It turned into a very wonderful experience.
I bet.
And
Well,
so,
John, this has been a blast. I see you had nothing to worry about. You've done a great job.
well, I
Bef-
got one for you.
okay, go ahead.
So whenever I talk Springsteen with people,
Mm.
I always like to leave them with one challenging bit of trivia,
Okay.
because um, as I have found, Springsteen fans know more about Springsteen than I think any other fans of any other musician. I mean, it's our passion. We know all the little minor details that really are. Sorry about that. My video was off. That we shouldn't, you know, waste our time knowing.
Okay.
But that's just, we care, and that's what we do. So I figured out that there's at least 5 songs, and there could be more, but there's 5 that I can remember, that have been officially released in an edited for time format.
Hmm.
So shorter than their original release.
Okay.
And I've tried to get Jim Rotolo to answer, and he won't.
Mhm.
um, so, and I've put it on Twitter a couple times, and no one wants to touch it. So that's kind of my trivia for people who really want to think of trivia.
Yeah.
And there's at least 5, like I said, that I came up with. There could be more that I haven't thought of, but it's a tough one.
Yeah. Don't know. Yeah, I wouldn't. Of course, I am not a. I because my first show is The Rising.
Mm-hmm.
I do not hold his early work with the same reverence as a lot of other fans. I
Yep.
acknowledge it's good. I like it, but it isn't like I could care less if I never heard the 78, Prove It All
Mm-hmm.
Night. I mean, that is
Right.
not a holy grail for me. I appreciate that it is. Now, of course, I'm one of the few people that Jolie Blanc is
I
on
love
my
that
wish
song.
list.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I went to school in Louisiana. My college's fight song was Jolie Blanc.
Mhm.
I am sad that I've only got to hear "Girls in Their Summer Clothes" once. I would love to hear, and I've never heard "I Work for Your Love." So we all have
Mhm.
different things we chase. So
Right.
I would have to think about that. I'm not sure uh, what they are. I do know that they made a big deal that both Letter to You and Ghost, the video is shorter than the actual song. That when you look at the song, if you just watch the videos version, and then if you
Mhm.
listen to the song, the video is shorter than the song version. So,
Okay.
and I know that.
All right. So
But
now I got 7 then.
okay, there you go. All
So it
right.
wasn't any of those.
Okay,
And
good.
and usually people are like, okay, well, the first couple are easy
Hmm.
because they're kind of like famously short,
Yeah.
and you've heard them.
Yeah.
um, the other 2.5, I want to say, are tougher.
Hmm.
And one of them, it's they play the wrong version on E Street Radio, and it always bugs me because I'm like, you do not have a time restriction, like you have to get to commercial
Yeah.
or something on E Street Radio. Play the longer version.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's not even that much longer. It's like 30 seconds longer, but it's significantly better in that version.
Okay, good.
So that's a hint.
So on your Twitter feed, if someone wants to answer the question, what's your Twitter handle so they can answer your question?
It's Duty Giuliani 1. So instead of Rudy, it's Duty.
Okay.
Just because when he was going insane, I thought that was kind of funny, and that was when I was starting on Twitter.
Okay.
Now he's fading away, hopefully soon, and maybe I'll have
Yes.
to consider changing it. But
Okay.
now I have, a fair number of followers, so now I'm kind of stuck with it.
Okay.
Uh,
All
but
right.
yeah, that's the easiest way. If anyone's, you know, got any answers to that, I'll give you the easiest one. It's Backstreets from 75, 85,
Okay.
because they pulled Sad Eyes out of it.
Hmm. Okay.
But the other one's a little more challenging.
Okay.
So
Well, it's your turn for the Mary question. So let's just say that you are a friend of John's and you're listening to this podcast and you've never heard it before, but you're like, my buddy John's there. I got to go listen to it. So for you, listeners, the Mary question is this: Jay Armstrong is an honors English teacher in the Philadelphia area. He just recently retired, but back when he was teaching, um, he would take his seniors honors English class and they would break down Thunder Road as a
hmm
poem. They would go through all the lyrics. He would
hmm
talk about the imagery and the visions and the themes Bruce explores, compare it to Robert Frost poetry. And at the end of it, uh, Jay asked the question: does Mary get in the car? So, John, that is your question. Does Mary get in the car at the end of Thunder Road?
yes, and the reason I say that has less to do with the specifics of the lyrics and more to do with, especially that point in his life, Bruce was still a very romantic
Okay.
person. So I find it hard to believe
Okay.
that she didn't.
Okay.
And I'm trying to think back if Wings for Wheels changes that answer with the original lyrics. But I think Bruce is so much of a romantic that, especially at that point in his career and with what the rest of the song represents, I'm going to say yes.
Okay. Very nice. Good job.
But again, could be entirely wrong. So, you know, it was like in 80, well, on more recent tours, you know, he said, you know, he wrote a lot of love songs that he hid the fact that they were love songs.
Yes.
You know, especially earlier in his career. And that was one of the things that I remember from the 88 tour was when he brought back Rosalita, it was with the proviso that that was the greatest love song he ever wrote.
Okay.
And that obviously has changed because now he writes more love songs,
Yes.
probably. But I remember him saying that specifically, and the crowd just realizing that, wait a minute, Rosalita's coming back after, you know, not being on the 85 tour.
Yeah.
And then the opening chords and the place going insane.
Yeah.
So so he was definitely, you know, in that time period, a romantic. So yeah.
Okay. Any final thoughts for us?
Just that you never know when the last show is going to be. So, you know, go see him as often as you can. Hopefully, you know, by 2022. Hopefully, in a miracle, late 2021. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to start getting some shows again. And like I said, if the E Street Band isn't touring, but Little Steven goes back out or Nils goes back out, I know he's, you know, been going stir crazy at his house.
Sure.
He really needs to get back out on the road.
Yes.
So, you know, go see them. They put on wonderful shows themselves and definitely deserve everyone's support. And really the Disciples of Soul, you know, it's not a stretch to start, you know, thinking in terms of, you know, a Springsteen show when they're playing. It's very similar in structure.
Absolutely.
You know, and the Nils shows are very different because, you know, he's Nils. But they're wonderful as well. So
good. Well, I appreciate your time, John. I hope you had a good time.
It's been fun. Yeah.
That's good. Listeners, thank you for listening so much. Please be safe. Remember to social distance, wash your hands, wear an effing mask. Let's all be good to each other because that's the only way we're going to get through this. But for now, thank you, and we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.
Have a good night.
Doing a podcast at times can be a one-way conversation, and I hate that. So please let me know what you like and don't like about the work I'm doing. You can reach the podcast via email at setlistingbruce@gmail.com. The show is on Twitter at setlistingbruce, and my personal Twitter is at jessejacksondfw. We have a website, www.setlistingbruce.com. From there, you can find links to other Springsteen podcasts as well as other music-themed podcasts. We have a page devoted to our own SLB All-Star Band. These are guests who have been on the podcast more than 3 times. There is a link to our store where you can purchase Set Listing Bruce shirts as well as a Merry Question t-shirt. There is a link to our Patreon page where you can sign up to help support the podcast financially. We have different levels and different rewards based on your support. If you don't have any extra cash, and right now who does, you can support the podcast by subscribing via your favorite podcast player and leaving us a review. The more reviews we have, the easier it is for people to find us. And please tell a friend about the podcast, especially if they love Bruce or music, because it will make a difference.
You just heard the fun talking, hard rocking, music loving, album ranking, fan thinking, joy spreading, lyric reading, story sharing podcast that is the one, the only Set Listing Bruce. Set Listing Bruce is part of the Southgate Media podcast group. The theme for Set Listing Bruce was written by David Rosen, used by permission.